Introducing AirMeet, an all-in-one virtual and hybrid events platform designed for high engagement with an attendee-first approach. Now double your leads and revenue by customizing your event with interactive features, branding, analytics, and audience insights, while enjoying up to 98% attendee retention.
Thanks for tuning in to the Customer Success Festival. We really hope you're enjoying the event so far. We've got some incredible sessions lined up for you guys, so don't miss out. Also, if you're looking to connect with our speakers and other attendees, head on over to our Slack channel to continue the discussion. Now sit back and get ready for the next session.
Hello everyone, my name is Tony Raffetto. Serve as Director of Customer Success at AppsFlyer. We're a mobile app attribution company. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about embracing meaning in customer success work. So we'll start by digging in a little bit about what it means to find meaning in work. We'll talk about the ways that you can think about giving actions meaning. And then I'm going to call out 3 different areas or opportunities that I think are a good way to start thinking about it, just to sort of put practice to the ideas, because I know this is a pretty conceptual topic, and I think it's something that a lot of people have explored over the years. I'm not by any means trying to cover every aspect of it, but I am trying to think about what, to me, gives meaning to the work that you do. So when I started working in an office job, I really had no idea what it would take to like what I did or love what I did. And I remember early on in my career, I read a book by Matthew Crawford. He wrote this book, Shop Class as Soulcraft. And the concept of the book was about his personal story, how he had basically taken a job as at a think tank, leading a company, and he had just kind of gotten sick of it. He wasn't finding meaning in his work. He wasn't motivated by it anymore. And when he was younger, he had been an electrician. And he actually ended up quitting that job and resuming his career by starting a motorcycle company, a motorcycle repair shop. And so he wrote this book. He was a bit of a philosopher. He still is. He wrote another book that's great called Drive. And in the book, he talks about how to find meaning in work and how difficult it can be, but how easy it is in comparison when you're working with your hands. And I really like this sentence that he uses. He can simply point the person who's working with his hands. The building stands, the car runs, the lights are on. There's something that you can point to and say, this is what I've accomplished. And it makes it so much easier to connect the value of what you're doing back to how it impacts the world. And that was kind of what I thought early on, that, maybe I wouldn't be able to find meaning in an office job, but maybe my meaning would come from hobbies or from things that I did when work was done. And that, I'd kind of separate the two. And then I would just do my job to make money. But as I started working in my current job, which I've now been in for 7 years, I started to think about some of the ways that I enjoyed what I did and how it drove meaning for me, and tried to understand and dissect it a little bit more. That's kind of where this presentation came from. And one of the things I really love and I really appreciate about the conversation of meaning is just the power that it has. And when you think about performance even and persistence, people who are motivated aren't typically motivated by fear or money or image or things that are external nearly as well. They're motivated by purpose or meaning, and it drives success. But what's also really interesting about that power is it doesn't make something not hurt. If something's going to hurt, if you're at the dentist and you're going through a procedure, it's still going to feel the same. If you're having a kid and you're motivated by that, it's still going to feel the same when you're experiencing those different pains. The difference is that you won't care about that pain. And so when we think about what meaning can do, we think about how it can drive performance, but also I think it can drive resilience and kind of protect you from pain or frustration, and even make things more valuable for you when you're doing them. And so how do you give action meaning? I really like this example here because everyone has a phone. And when you think about the things that you do with your phone, if you just remove the picture, it's a very generic action. You pick it up, you swipe this way, that way, the other way, you tap your finger a couple times. The action itself is fairly meaningless. And the action tends to be pretty meaningless across all of the different things that you do with your device physically. But people find so much value and so much engagement from their devices. And this is why. I mean, you're not just interacting with a screen, you're getting responses. You're seeing the light and the visuals and the sounds and the colors. And the actions that you perform are just as trivial, swiping your finger across the screen. But the way that you respond to it is completely different. And so when I think about finding meaning, one of the things that I always think about is what are those cues that are around you? First, in the context of finding that story, how do you create a story? In Fruit Ninja, obviously you're moving along levels to get to where you want to go. But what are the cues that are in your work environment? What are the actions that you take? What are the responses back to you that create that environment? So maybe it's a thank you letter from a customer recognizing your role in helping. Maybe it's a skill that you take on and work on a new project in your organization. So you can't get meaning out of the actions that you're taking if they don't have a greater story that overlaps them. That's where the second point comes into play. Be the protagonist. So how do you shape your environment and your team's environment to work on developing that meaning? And then again, super critical, how do you determine how those actions and how that environment relates back to your goals? How does it get you to where you want to go? How does it solve a customer's problem? How does it make you feel like you are progressing in your career? So we'll talk about a few different ways that you can kind of think about doing that in the next few sections. We'll start with service types and success. We'll go into embracing adversity, and then we'll talk about a camps model, what I like to use with my different team members. So when we talk about service types and success, the thing that I like to talk about is the idea of what makes an effective frontline service rep. So Gartner did this study, and what they wanted to understand was with customer success or customer service representatives, they broke them down into 7 different types of engagers. We'll talk through them really quickly. The first is the hard worker, somebody who wants to take care, to follow rules. They like working with numbers. They're persistent. The second is the empathizer. They like to spend time helping people. They care. They understand people's motives, or at least they try to. The next is the innovator. So that person prefers variety. They behave differently depending on each situation. They like to generate new ideas. The next one is the controller. So they're talkative. They make their strengths known. They're willing to freely express opinions. The next one after that is the rock. So they tend to feel relaxed. They expect things to turn out well. They're difficult to offend. After that is the competitor. Pretty self-explanatory. They like to compete. They like to win. They like to make quick decisions. and they like to change other people's perspectives. And then lastly, you have the accommodator. So that is the person who tends to believe the customer. They enjoy others' company. They like to be involved in others, or they like to involve others in their decision making and vice versa. So within these different 7 types, they wanted to examine what's the most effective type in terms of driving customer success. So I'll pause here for a second just to give people a chance to think through it. And I think what most people think about is number 2, the empathizer, that person who thinks about the customer's problems and they want to understand it and they like to spend time helping people. But that's actually not the most effective personality type in this situation. Interestingly enough, it is the most represented according to their study, but it's not the most effective. So which is the most effective? The controller. And I know maybe the bullet points in the previous slide were a little bit deceptive here, so I'm not surprised if anyone didn't get this. But the point that it comes into is it emphasizes fast and easy resolution. You're not offering as much choice, but you're offering more guidance and how to solve people's problems. And I added this point here, you're acting as a protagonist. You're having a take action mentality. You're not just reacting. You're not just being an expert on a topic. You're understanding what a customer is trying to accomplish, and you're proceeding to work them that way. And it's interesting because in customer success now, it's pretty standard terminology. But at AppsFlyer, for example, we call this business desired outcomes. And when we work with our customers, we focus on that. We say, what is the customer trying to accomplish? And how do we help get them towards that goal? That's what being a protagonist in customer success is. And I wanted to give an example because I wanted to tie it back to the original story that we started with Matthew Crawford. Now, when I wasn't sure how I was going to get value in my work and the meaning of what I was trying to do, I took a job on the weekends, similar to Matthew Crawford, working at the parts counter at the Harley Davidson dealership. So essentially my job would be to help people purchase the parts that they needed. So somebody would come up to the counter, that counter that I'm standing on, and they would say, hey, I need a new clutch for my motorcycle. And the thing is, I could order them a clutch, probably a several $100 part. They're probably going to have to take hours and hours to install it. I'll probably have to wait a few weeks for it to come in because it's not the kind of thing that we tend to keep in stock. And so I can get that customer a clutch, put that into the system, and give them a call when it's ready. But if that part doesn't solve that customer's problem, then they're going to have a negative experience because they're going to spend more time, they're going to spend more money. They might even have to pay somebody to put the clutch in themselves, or put the clutch in if they can't do it themselves. And they're just generally going to have a negative experience of Harley Davidson. And I'm sure plenty of other people have negative experiences of them anyway, but that would be because of the engagement that we had. But if I understood the motorcycle and the way that it worked and the different interactions of the different parts, then before ordering that clutch for that person, I would ask them, have you tried a simple adjustment? What are the symptoms that you're seeing? Why do you think you need a new clutch? And those few questions about what they're trying to accomplish might allow me to save them hundreds of dollars, weeks of time not riding or even fixing their bike, and get them the answer to their problem really quickly. And I use that example because that is an exact example that happened more than once when I worked with the people there. And I really, again, I like this example because I think it kind of calls out how the jobs that we have in customer success are universal. The job that I had there at the Harley dealership to do it properly and to support customers was the exact same job that customer success managers have today in software as a service and so on. If I didn't understand the system that was at play, then I wouldn't be able to help the customer. And not much has changed. Still standing on desks all these years later. So the next topic I wanted to get into is adversity, because I think this is something that's a really difficult topic in customer success, because I think it's something that's hard for people to stay in CS as long as they do because of this. Because I think a lot of times challenging situations with customers is draining. It's not fun to hear people complain about your product or to blame you for different things or to feel like you're potentially the thing that is in the way of them getting their goals accomplished. And and so I try to break down a few different things about how you can kind of embrace rather than run away from adversity. So the first one is, I like to think about it from the perspective of a habit loop. So actually, there's a really great book, Atomic Habits. I took this habit loop concept from, but it's a pretty universal concept. Obviously, he did a really good job of breaking it down. And what they talk about when you think about habits is you think about a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. That cue is some sort of action that drives you to eventually act. That's your response. And then to get a reward out of it. And what I wanted to understand is, what do people do when those difficult actions or those difficult situations or adverse experiences happen? Can you create a habit loop that actually allows you to embrace them? And the thing that I kind of started to realize was that the cue could actually just be that adverse experience. So when a customer is unhappy, that's your cue to have a response. And what the book touches on, and what's really important when you think about habits, is if you don't have a good reward, you don't have a good habit. And so, what is the reward that you can get by interacting with in a difficult situation? And that's what we try to think about here. Taking that concept of a difficult or traumatic situation with the customer, again, maybe a product is broken, maybe there's a deadline that was missed, maybe the customer is relying on you to understand something before they can go live or go to market, whatever it is. How do you take that and you turn it into a positive situation? And one of the things that I always think about is actually a quote that my CEO gave a few years ago. And he said, happiness is a circle. And I know it's a really simple quote, but that's what I appreciate about it, is that when you think about how you make people happy, that doesn't just make them happy, it spreads back to you. And it also spreads to other people around them, their team members, their family, their friends, whatever it is. And so when you think about making somebody happy even just in the context of customer success, that reward, that circle is coming back in the form of you being able to also be happy. We think about it a few different ways, actually. One of the things that really stood out to me in the book Influence by Robert Cialdini is how customers responded to difficult situations with hotels. So they did this study where they basically analyzed how guests responded or how guests reviewed hotels in different situations. So they reviewed them when they had no issues, just had a perfectly calm experience. They reviewed them when they had issues and they were swiftly resolved. And they reviewed them when they had issues and those issues weren't resolved. Now, obviously, that last scenario, that's when people were the least happy or rated the experience the lowest. But what was really interesting about this study was that they found that guests actually rated the experience highest when they had issues, but those issues were swiftly resolved. And so when you're thinking back about that habit loop, suddenly you can think about issues actually as opportunities to make a customer happier than they would have otherwise been. It can improve your solution, it can build rapport and reciprocity, and it can help you find meaning because it's helping you understand how to drive that happiness back with a customer. And so instead of feeling like, oh, shoot, there's an issue, customer's going to be so mad, we don't have a solution here, or there's not much we can do, you can suddenly turn that into an opportunity to build a better guest experience. Danny Meyer also touches on a similar concept in his book, Setting the Table. What he says is that whenever a customer has an issue, he tries to make sure that the last engagement they have is going to be a positive one. So he calls that rewriting the ending. So you take the concept of maybe a customer didn't get the food that they wanted, or maybe they had to wait too long, or maybe it wasn't cooked right. If you can take that negative scenario and make sure that that last experience is a positive one, maybe you give them a free glass of wine, maybe you offer a free dish or a discount or something like that, that allows you to rewrite the ending. And similarly, you'll get a positive or improved customer experience from that. Finally, I want to talk about a model of engaging with team members that I really appreciate. It's called the CAMPS model. It's from, I think, Life Labs Learning. And it breaks down the acronym into 5 categories: certainty, autonomy, meaning, progress, and social inclusion. So certainty is understanding your goals, what to focus on, what's important. Autonomy is about having control of your work. Do you feel like you're being micromanaged, or do you feel like you can take control of your actions and you have your own authority there? Meaning, can you tie back your actions to how they benefit you or how they benefit other people? And we talked a bit about doing this. Things like appreciation from customers can be a really good example of this. Talk about progress. How do you know what markers you're looking at along the way that show you that you're progressing, that you're not just staying in the same place? And lastly, social inclusion. So feeling a sense of belonging, feeling like you're welcome in the group, maybe that you have good connections there. And so when I think about meaning from a leadership perspective, I also try and work with my team members to understand this. Do they feel like they have certainty? Do they feel like they have autonomy? Do they feel like they have meaning and progress and social inclusion? Because if they don't, then their environment probably isn't allowing them to understand the actions that they're getting back, and it will probably cause them to suffer lower engagement. And I put a link in here too, and you can kind of rate yourself and rate your experience based on the 5 different categories. And so again, just kind of key takeaways from this presentation. The first is about being the protagonist. I mean, take that empty screen and say, what are the cues that you can add to it that give your work meaning and that give your environment a way that it can have meaning as well. Also wanted to reiterate the value of that. The meaning drives, like we saw in the beginning, it drives performance, it drives resilience, both in customer outcomes when you're acting as that controller, and also in your personal success, because you suddenly are able to embrace things, not because they don't hurt or because they're not difficult, but because you have a purpose to why you're doing them. And then again, lastly, embracing adversity. How do you use that habit loop to create rewards? How do you use adversity to build stronger relationships and rewrite the ending? And then finally, the CAMPS model. How do you take that work environment, you examine where your team members and where you fit into that, and build out some of those gaps that can cause you to feel like you're missing meaning. And that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you everyone for listening. And if there's any questions, I'd love to hear them. You can just email me or reach out on LinkedIn, Tony@appsflyer.com. Thank you, everyone.